So, Erika Anthony, last December, the Plain Dealer featured this headline. Erika Anthony is a potent, behind-the-scenes force for equitable democracy, and they hailed her as a Cleveland champion. That headline made public what those who know her have long believed, that she is, in fact, a potent force. That force founded Cleveland Votes in 2014 with the belief that if everyone could vote, we could attain equitable democracy and a more just world. A Long Island native, she came to Cleveland about 15 years ago, earning her master's degree at Cleveland State. She worked at the Centers for Families and Children and Oriana House before moving over to become the Vice President for Government Relations and Strategy at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. Just last December, she began as the Executive Director of the Ohio Transformation Fund. And if you get a sense that her career is built on a passion for righting injustices, you are 100% right. The nonpartisan Cleveland Votes works to mobilize voters and to move them to create equitable citizenry, civic engagement. She gives back not only through Cleveland Votes, since that's not her true paying job, but also through service on the boards of IdeaStream, Edwin's, Negative Space Gallery, the Cleveland Young Professional Senate, Northeast Ohio Voter Advocates, and I'm sure there are more that I didn't even find. So you are a force, Erika. She's a proud alum of Cleveland Bridge Builders, and there is no better time than to hear her words than today.
Awesome. Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Marianne, for the amazing introduction. I'm just a Long Island girl. So that's the quick bio of Erika, currently residing in OB. Everyone says that I had to have a little bit of Brooklyn in me. So that's why I chose Old Brooklyn as the neighborhood of choice in Cleveland. I always want to carry a little bit of my home state with me. So as you can see behind me. Thank you so much to CLC for hosting this. I'm going to share my screen. I know we have a short amount of time, so I want to jump right in and get to the meat of the conversation. So thank you again to Rachel, Marianne, and all of the CLC staff for providing this opportunity for us to talk about how to activate for the 2020 election. As Marianne indicated, Cleveland Votes is a nonpartisan democracy building and mobilization entity that strengthens civic muscle and power to ensure we have a more informed, participatory, and cohesive community. So because our time is short, we're gonna jump right in. So yesterday was National Voter Registration Day, really exciting day here in the greater Cleveland area. Really honored and proud of all of our partners, along with the Board of Election for mobilizing around voter registration and voter mobilization. But the day is significant because yesterday was exactly 2 days out from our voter registration deadline, which is next Monday, or 2 Mondays from now, October 5th. So when we think about, how do we activate, how do we engage in this upcoming election, the first and foremost thing that you need to do is make sure that your voter registration status is in fact updated and current. I want to encourage everyone after this brief lunch break to head over to ohvotes.org. Even if you say, Erika, I have consistently voted, I know I'm up to date, promise you, please, please, please go over to ohvotes.org and verify. We have heard and seen too many situations where folks are sorely disappointed when they try to vote or cast their ballot and realize that their voter registration status is not accurate and or up to date. So we really want to encourage folks to make sure that that is up to date. And when you head to ohvotes.org, which is via our state partner, Ohio Votes, you have a couple of different options. Once you get there, you can check your voter registration status. You can also request your mail, or not your mail, your vote by mail, not your mail. You don't want to get your mail from them, your vote by mail. You can make a pledge and make a plan to vote and explore other options. So making a plan is really important, particularly as we all still try to navigate this global pandemic. So much of what we thought, our lives were going to be have vastly changed. So many folks are balancing working from home, having families, little toddlers popping in on screens, caring for family members or neighbors. So there's so much unpredictable about our life, about our world right now, that it is really important that you think about and plan ahead for how you will cast your ballot. So you have a couple of options, and many of these options existed before the pandemic, but some things have changed, and we just want to kind of jump into that. So the first option, while I cannot tell you how to vote, I want to highly encourage you to consider voting from home. I will say myself is a person that likes to go down to the poll on election day and cast my ballot. Historically, the co-founder of Cleveland Votes, Crystal Bryant, has been a steadfast vote from home individual, right? It shows that we have agency and we have choice. But right now, during this pandemic, the health of you, the health of our workers, the health of everyone involved in this democratic process is of most importance to us. So this is by far the safest way that you can cast your ballot this year. It does require a couple of steps. So first, you have to make sure you have active voter registration status. From there, you can request your ballot. Now, the Secretary of State did send out ballots to individuals that are registered. So you may have already received that to your home. But if you didn't, you will head over to, again, ohvotes.org. You can download and fill out that ballot. If you don't have a printer, that's okay. You can take a blank piece of paper and basically document the same information that that application entails. And then you have to either go downtown to the Board of Election, which is located on 30th between Chester and Euclid Avenues, and drop your application into their 24-hour secure drop box. You can also mail that back if you have the ability to do so. So in addition to checking your voter registration as soon as you're done, because you have an hour for lunch, so you'll have time to do these things at 12:30, you want to make sure that if this is the option that you're choosing, that go ahead and do it. We don't want to wait until the deadline, which is technically October 31st, because we want to flatten the ballot curve. The reality is that the number of individuals requesting their absentee ballot this year is exploding, which is great. But that also means that's a lot of work on our respective boards of election to make sure that they can process those. So if all of a sudden we're at the end of October and they get 100,000 applications, well, that's a little ridiculous and that's a little unfair for them. They're human beings also. So we don't want to wait last minute. So please, if this is the option that you're choosing, be sure to do that as soon as possible. And then just a couple more information, a little picture here of what that ballot box looks like at the Board of Election. The other option is to vote early. So that will begin on October 6th. So the day after the voter registration deadline, the Board of Election will make available early voting for all registered voters. That goes through Monday, November 2nd. You will head to the Board of Election again. So you're not going to your local polling location, your church or your library. You're having to go downtown to the Board of Election, again, located on 30th between Euclid and Chester Avenues, and you may cast your ballot there. Again, if you have flexibility in the day, think about some non-peak hours that you might be able to head down there. Probably first thing in the morning or lunchtime may be a little bit busier, but there are many hours available. We are very fortunate in this regard that we do have a pretty robust number of hours available for early voting. There's a picture here of the hours, but you can also, once you've received this presentation, you can make access and go directly to the Board of Election to see that complete schedule. And then the last option is to go to your respective polling location on election day, which is Tuesday, November 3rd. Polls are open 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. We highly encourage you to verify your polling location. I was on a call with the director of the BOE this week. He has indicated no official word has come out yet, but there will be polling location changes. So even if you went to that church up the street, for the last election that you voted in person, you want to make sure that is in fact your polling location. So that's really critical. The other thing that's really critical, not just for in-person election day voting, but for every part of the process for casting your ballot, is looking at your sample ballot. You want to prepare yourself. You could do that, as soon as possible, but don't want to wait until the last minute to see what is in fact on our ballot. While yes, this is a presidential year, we have a countless number of different candidates and issues that will be on our ballot, and that will vary depending on the municipality of which you reside. If you are going to your respective polling location on election day, again, we want to maintain the safety of yourself and all those involved. So please have a mask, gloves, sanitizer, all that you need to ensure that you are safe and those around you are safe as well. Just briefly, as you think about, for yourself or for the organizations that you represent, some different strategies that you may want to consider. I know ahead of this session today, Rachel shared out the Cleveland's Commit to CLE toolkit, which goes into much more detail, but just really high level, thinking about sort of natural ways that you communicate with your audiences and leveraging your marketing and communication channels, whether that's through your website. We have here in the top left-hand corner, CHN, when you go to their website, a little light box pops up, and then excuse me, that light box will take you to how to register to vote. In the top right-hand corner, Brooklyn Museum of Art has embedded, this was a couple months ago, they embedded at the bottom of their weekly newsletter information about census, information about casting your ballot. If you have the ability to do any sort of virtual engagements like what we're on right now, here's an example of some of my comrades in democracy building hosting a conversation. This was during the primary election period. So just simple ways that information can be embedded in the natural ways that you are communicating. If you have the ability to do PSAs, we love to see celebrities talk about these different issues. We saw a lot of them yesterday for National Voter Registration Day, but we also have a lot of local influencers. So really thinking about the audience and who you're trying to communicate to and who would best resonate with them to hear these messages. We always encourage employers to consider giving their employees a day off or partial day off, so that way they don't have any barriers as it relates to casting their ballot on election day. And then as we're getting closer, we're starting to see more debates come up. Obviously, we have the first presidential debate taking place on the 29th, but then we have congressional and judicial, so different things that are happening. Those are also great opportunities. One benefit of Zoom is that, we can create these convenings in a way that, you can tap into more people. So perhaps consider hosting a debate watch party and have some dialogue, or a ballot watch party. So that way, either your neighbors or your family can go through your ballot and you all can have a conversation about that. And then as individuals, we often say, we get on the airplane, or back in the day we got on the airplane, and our flight attendant would say, make sure you grab that oxygen for yourself before you start helping others. And it's the same thing for making your voter plan. We do encourage, of course, external and broad strategies, but also thinking about yourself first, and that way you can encourage others to think about how to create their voter plan. And as I indicated before, and you all received, we have an entire toolkit that is pretty robust in detailing much of this in detail. We have opportunities to volunteer, and then we're doing things like peer-to-peer and friend-to-friend texting if that's of interest to you all. So this is just a brief recap. Voter registration, mail-in ballots, early in-person voting, healthy in-person voting, get out to vote efforts, and then we rinse and repeat, right? Because we'll have another election in 21, 22, and beyond. So at the end of this year, it's a time for us to pause and reflect and think about, our strategies and how we engage with our partners in community. Rest, because that's not happening right now, and then get ready for, what may be on deck for 21. So I'm honored to be here before you, but many of you know that this work is done in a collaborative way, and I'm so grateful to Crystal Bryant for sharing the vision to create Cleveland Votes, and her and I have just been tremendously blessed with Jennifer and Devontae to join the team, and the four of us and many other democracy builders are able to do this work daily in support of our community. So with that, I say thank you. Head to our website for more information and check out our toolkit. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Great, Erika, thank you so much. This is amazing information. And as we think about making sure this information is shared, how can information like this is being communicated with elderly or those who might have a challenge with getting out of their homes?
Sure. So I think the primary election really taught us a lot this year. We had no choice, all of us had no choice or no preparation for this global pandemic. And a lot of folks were pivoting to digital strategies. And one thing I think, our partners, Cleveland Votes partners, we really wanted to remain steadfast in saying we need both and. We do have digital redlining in the greater Cleveland area. We know that individuals do not have access always to information as it pertains to digital communication. So while that is a tactic tactic and that is a strategy, we know that we still have to be boots on the block in a very safe way, which admittedly has been very challenging. So we operate through our partners and trusted messengers in the community. So making sure that, we do have a broad reach of nonprofits that we engage in, everyone from, a community development corporation to NEOC, homeless advocacy organizations, some culture specific organizations like Young Latino Network. So our aspiration is to engage partners that are trusted by their respective constituents and then use those methods to communicate. So for some of the historically disenfranchised, marginalized voters, a lot of the strategies have not changed. So making information accessible and available, we've seen great efforts across the city where folks are creating like vote by mail boxes and putting those up in places that are high traffic. We've seen some of our local restaurants even do this. As I get my ice cream cone from Mason Creamery, they have their lovely drop box or pop-up box in front of their establishment. And really going to where the people are, whether it's, through our gas stations, our local corner stores, we have to be responsive to where people are, even if folks are still sheltering. There are, specific locations throughout our community, grocery stores, things of that nature, where folks are still visiting.
So if Cleveland's funding community were to partner and mobilize around safe and healthy voting in November, what should they do or prioritize to make the greatest impact at this time?
Can you repeat the first part? I'm sorry, Rachel.
Yeah, it would be looking at Cleveland's funding community. So if they were to mobilize around this, what should they do or prioritize now to make a greatest impact?
Sure. Have a conversation now, but then let's talk again on November 4th. Because again, this work is 365 days a year, not just for this upcoming election. Long-term investments need to be made in organizations that are doing democracy building. One of the challenges that we do have in this work is that there tends to be a huge influx of funding coming in late August, September, which we are appreciative of, but it makes it hard to plan and act accordingly to deploy those dollars in an effective way. So long-term investment in organizations are critical. Right now, making accessible dollars for organizations to print materials. While we are able to get some materials from the Board of Election, having informational signs, those things are not offered by the Board of Election. So as an example, I know for instance, the League of Women Voters a couple of weeks ago was printing a sign that indicated what to notice when a census worker comes up, right? Because, if you're like me, it's COVID. I'm not opening that door unless it's my husband. So, being aware of this is what you should be looking for a census worker, so that's a cost that, the League, as an example, had to, absorb, and we provided funding for that. Stamps, as individuals don't necessarily have the ability to drive downtown to the Board of Election and, would prefer to mail back either their application or their ballot, making accessible resources for organizations to disperse stamps. Transportation, we have had in the past a program called Ride to the Polls. We did suspend that during the primary election for safety reasons, and we have not resumed that. But if, credits can be given through Lyft or Uber, again, we're not necessarily encouraging congregate rides because of COVID, but making accessible, a credit for Uber or Lyft for people to get down to the polls is really critical.
So do you have a recommended platform where voters can see kind of simple summaries of local, state, and federal candidates, their stances on kind of basic or various issues? There are just so many resources that it's hard to know which ones to trust and where to turn to.
Yeah, definitely. And you should question all resources, particularly in this mode of, if folks have seen The Great Hack on Netflix, if you haven't, don't see it, because then you'll be scorned like I am. These are real things, people encroaching on our democracy. So always verify and double check the sources that you are checking out. The one that I think is the most concise and has the most information would be vote411.org. And that is offered both in English and in Spanish. So that's national. So, even if you yourself or others are outside of Ohio, that is a national platform offered by the League of Women Voters. You just have to put your name and your address, and then it brings up information pertaining to what is on your ballot.
So Erica, can you speak to some of the community events that Cleveland Votes has been hosting? And also, as you are interacting with community members around voting and registration, what are some of the concerns or challenges that you're hearing from them?
Sure. So many of the events, which have been admittedly minimal, because COVID is real, and we very much understand that. So we haven't done, nowhere close to the amount of events that we normally would do in person. So the virtual engagements have been really helpful. We've partnered with Third Space Action Lab and a local restaurant entrepreneur to host these biscuit and democracy events for a couple of weekends over the course of the summer, and just one last week. And I think, the pairing has been really critical this year. Shonda, who is the entrepreneur who owns Cleveland Biscuit Head, is a restaurant entrepreneur, and I think people have a perception of what a democracy builder is. Everyone is a democracy builder. We always come from the lens and perspective of, if you believe in your community and want to see equity in your community, then we all play a role, and that role will look different from person to person. So, while Shonda does not necessarily prescribe or say that she's an organizer and activist, I very much think she is. She's a woman of influence in Cleveland and has a platform, and, on her own said, like, I want to help elevate the importance of the election. So that's been a great pairing with Third Space. Earlier this year, we partnered with some of the Near West Side organizations to launch the first Caravana events. And again, this was right in the beginning of the pandemic. Folks were really, really scared about, how can we do this work effectively? And shout out to Selena and many others from Young Latino Network and other organizations, who borrowed this strategy directly from Puerto Rico and said, like, we can do this safely in our cars, right? And play some amazing Latinx music and get people to look out their windows and figure out what's going on, but then in a real way, get them their vote by mail applications and then come back around and pick those up. We've seen a lot of pairing with COVID testing locations or food drives. And again, because we're not at full capacity in operating really any of our programs or any of our services in the community, we have to be thoughtful and efficient as it relates to, where are people still going and how can we make this information accessible? And then you had a second part about challenges that I forgot.
Are you hearing from those you're seeing in the community through these events, what concerns or challenges they're having around the upcoming election and voting?
Yeah, so some are not new, some are new for this year. I think there's 4 individuals and 4 parts of our community that have been historically disenfranchised and marginalized from equitable access to the vote. There's concerns about trust of our government, trust of these processes. Obviously in the last couple of months, we've had the issues, or we've been hearing about issues with our postal service. And, if I do in fact choose this vote from home option, will my ballot get to the Board of Election? And I should say there is the ability to track your ballot if you go to the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections website, so you can check on that. Lots of advocacy around making more drop boxes available in our community. Lots of advocacy around making the ballot return envelope paid postage. So again, many of these things were challenges pre-COVID. And I think the layer of us working in multiple pandemics this year just makes those issues that much more exasperated, right? So it's not that they're necessarily new, it's just even more challenging because of the multiple pandemics that we're living through.
So question has come up around stamps and mail-in voting. So some have heard that they're not allowed to give out stamps due to Ohio law that states a person cannot receive something of value in exchange for registering to vote or voting. Do you have any take on this, or if anyone else has run into this issue?
Yeah, so what I will say from our legal counsel, because this has been a big point of contention for us, is that it cannot be a quid pro quo. So we can offer stamps to community members. If they choose not to use that stamp to return their application or the ballot, there's nothing we can do about that. So it can't be for in exchange of, I'm giving you the stamp so you can mail your application. I'm giving you the stamp so you can return your ballot. There has to be agency and the choice that individual is making, and we cannot force them to use that stamp as it relates to returning the application or the ballot. So,
and also quite a few questions around volunteering and being involved. So what is the best way to sign up as a volunteer? Is there an area of greatest need for volunteer support?
Yeah, so it varies. I'll say for us, we have a basic like volunteer interest form that we ask folks to fill out. We're basically matching the volunteers with our partners. But for every organization, I will say this is in that, post-election debrief, reflect area. This year, unlike I think any year, has been the most challenging in volunteer management. And I think, in part because there's been an uprise or upsurge of individuals who are like, hey, I want to get out, I want to do stuff, which is great, but there is unfortunately not a lot of capacity at most of the organizations that we work with to do volunteer management, which is in itself an entire job. So we have real talk like piecemealed it this year for Cleveland Votes because we wanted to be responsive to the folks that were expressing interest, but it has not been amazing. If I'm being honest, it's been very hard. And, people get excited and they say we want to volunteer, and then we contact them and it's like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to do that. And it's like, okay. So a lot of conversation needs to be had about volunteer management, but I will say for us, we do have a basic form that we encourage folks to fill out, and then we do our best to connect them. I think, there are some limited in-person events that are happening. We have a peer-to-peer texting relational organizing campaign, which can be done from home. So unlike folks may know that there's like ways that you can like pull lists from our data, our voter registration data. This is different. This is you contacting your peers. So whether that's your friends, your neighbors, your family, we have a platform called Outvote, and we have, scripts and things of that nature. So it's a different form of texting, but still very effective. So that's another way. And then your nucleus, right? We always tell people, don't assume those closest to you have this information, know this information, the information is accessible to them. So even just starting with, your own circle of family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, and making sure everybody's good. Like, I'm that nagging person in everyone's life. So I need for you all to be that nagging person in everyone's life and make sure they got their plan up and running.
So as we look to one more question here, what is really going to be needed over the next few weeks to truly activate our community, Cleveland, this region, in the election this year?
Well, one, take the census. For the love of God, please take the census. If you live in the city of Cleveland, I looked, I think yesterday we were just over 50. So we finally made it over the 50% mark. So please take the census. Our self-response, not ours, the self-response deadline for the United States is next week, September 30th. So that is huge. And that could be a whole nother conversation about, the census, but the big picture is we need folks to respond. And then from there is make your voter plan. And again, once you have your plan in order, to the extent that you have access, the extent that you feel comfortable and safely to engage, we really just, this is all hands on deck. If this is not just about those organizations that are, mission oriented to do this work, this is really about if you value Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, every part that you contribute is helpful. There's no one small part that is not contributing to the macro element of what does it mean to activate our community. So just, do your daggone thing.
Well, Erika, thank you so much. And we thank you and the entire team with Cleveland Votes for all of the advocacy work and activation that you are doing during this election, and what will of course start on November 4th as we look ahead. And for those on the call, we will share the toolkit again in the follow-up email. And Erika, we hadn't asked if it might be possible to share your slides with all the great information you had.
Most certainly.
Wonderful. So we will share that as well. So thank you again. And I'm going to turn it back to Marianne.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Erika, the plain dealer just summed it up very well when they said that you are a potent force. I'll just remind everyone, this is not her full-time paying job. This is her passion that she is living every day. And our greater Cleveland community is so much better for that. So thank you for all that you're doing. I know there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting in the weeks ahead leading up to November. So thank you in advance for all of that. You've got a whole crew here ready to help you get the word out in any way. And you've given us a great start to that. So thank you.